Nove, as a brand, really likes to experiment and do wild things with their watches, which is why I'm always happy when they announce a new model. Each one I reviewed so far has been crazier than the one before it, and it is the case with this one as well. Called Marine and limited to 500 pieces, it takes the classical concept of a dive watch with easy-to-read markers and a timing bezel and reverses the formula by making the bezel float within the dial and placing the hour markers on the outside. They introduced that concept on the Atlantean I reviewed, and although I loved the idea, Atlantean as a watch was huge and the bezel mechanism was complicated, featuring that locking arm that sat weirdly to the side of the case. This, however, retains the wacky concept with the inner floating bezel and outer hour markers, but they made it wearable and more classical by packing it inside a 41.5mm watch case with a relatively short lug-to-lug of under 48, and also ditching the complicated mechanism of outer teeth running the inner bezel for a more practical super compressor styled crown operation. It makes the watch more practical for day-to-day wear. The one dimension I was not sure about in the unboxing was the claimed thickness of 13.5mm. I measured it a couple of times and yes, it really is 13.5, but it wears like a sub 10mm watch. The reason for this can be found in the use of domed crystals for both the front and the back. The domes give it the measured 13.5, but without them the watch is under 9mm thick, which makes it wear like a sub 10mm watch, as you usually don't see the domes on your wrist. It sits alone and balanced and slides under any sleeve without problems. It looks and wears much thinner than my Submariner, even though the Sub is officially 1mm thinner. That shows you how much a shape of a watch can affect the size perspective. But back to the dial. The floating bezel is simply stunning. The chunks of lume floating above the matte black dial really stand out and pop, and I love how you can see their sides clearly as you tilt the watch. It creates such a cool effect that it still makes me feel excited whenever I check the time. I like the hands as well. They're oversized and almost paddle-shaped and very cohesive in design. I especially love the use of red for the seconds hand. It is unusual and makes the red paddle really stand out. But before you think it might be better if it was lumed, it is, just not the paddle itself, but the whole seconds hand. And thanks to a really ample use of Superluminova C3, which is pretty potent, the whole watch glows. It is one of those watches that wows you every time when you walk into a slightly dim room. Another detail I love is the splash of red on the crowns. Both are screw-in type, and as soon as you start unscrewing them, you get a little red line that disappears only when they're fully screwed in. A simple yet brilliant solution of indicating when it is safe to expose the watch to water. And with 200 meters of water resistance, you can expose it to any water activity worry-free. Even the bracelet is made with diving in mind, featuring on-the-fly adjustment. It is well executed with solid links, solid end links, and even quick-release spring bars. But I do have one detail I wish they improved: the clasp itself. Despite featuring on-the-fly adjustment, it feels and sounds a bit tinny compared to the latest offerings from other micro brands. It's still awesome, but just falls short compared to the rest of the watch. Another thing they can improve is the bezel operation. Despite the crown getting disconnected from the bezel when you push it in to screw it down, it will sometimes move it just slightly, which can be annoying. If they added just a bit more resistance to the bezel itself, that wouldn't happen, which Alto 8 I reviewed recently clearly shows. But it might be limited to this exact piece, and maybe the other ones are better. I simply don't know. Other than these two details, I absolutely love the watch, and even the Sellita SW200 used to power it has been excellent, keeping the time within a couple of seconds a day. At roughly $900, this thing is on the more expensive side compared to other micro brands with the same specs. but quite frankly, the wacky design and floating bezel alone are worth it. It really is unlike anything I reviewed so far, with the exception of its bigger brother, and it is also one of very few watches that my work buddies noticed and commented on, which means it does attract attention. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is up to you. I'm only sad that they limited the production to 500 pieces. I think this is so cool and unique, it should become their standard offering, as it oozes with their design DNA and their wackiness. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and until the next video, bye.